There have been plenty of films where actors and actresses refuse to participate. The most common reasons: scheduling conflicts, dissatisfaction with the paycheck, or simply not seeing themselves in the role. But sometimes an entire cast of potential stars turns down a project for a much more unusual reason, like when a script is universally considered ridiculously bad. When that happens, half of Hollywood might reject it. That's exactly what occurred with the sequel to Commando, which eventually transformed into Die Hard. A similar situation unfolded a little later with director Jean de Bont's film Speed. The only people willing to sign on were Sandra Bullock, who was virtually unknown at the time and had a streak of box office flops, and Keanu Reeves, who seemed to pick projects at random. Today, let's talk about one of the biggest successes of 1994, a movie that could have been the highest-grossing action film of the year, if not for James Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger ensuring that didn't happen. The screenplay for this incredible film was written by Graham Yost, who, at the time, had only worked on a few lesser-known TV shows like Herman's Head. He originally titled it Minimum Speed and began pitching it to Hollywood studios. His first stop was Paramount, but no one there was impressed. They told him the story needed more than just a bus. Initially, Yost planned for the film to end with both the bus and a plane exploding, followed by the characters celebrating and heading home. After taking Paramount's criticism to heart, he scrapped the supervillain aspect and added a subway sequence instead. In the early drafts, the main villain was the character later played by Jeff Daniels. Midway through the film, there was supposed to be a twist revealing that Dennis Hopper's character was just a pawn. However, Yost realized this twist felt too childish, something that might only impress very young kids. With the revised script in hand, he approached 20th Century Fox. Unlike Paramount, the execs at Fox actually found it interesting. That's when the refusals started, one of the longest rejection streaks in Hollywood history. The first person to turn down the film? Quentin Tarantino. Not because he thought the script was bad. He was just too busy with Pulp Fiction and felt Speed wasn't his kind of project. Ironically, he later listed Speed among his top 20 favorite films. Next, the offer went to John McTiernan, the director of Predator, Die Hard, and The Hunt for Red October. McTiernan read the script and passed. At the time, he kept saying he was tired of action movies and wanted to move away from the genre. Instead, he chose to direct Last Action Hero, a parody of action films. However, he did make one key suggestion: Fox should hire Jean de Bont, the cinematographer he had worked with on Die Hard and The Hunt for Red October. At that time, every movie de Bont worked on seemed to turn into a hit. He had just wrapped up work on Lethal Weapon 3, and Fox figured that hiring the cinematographer behind Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, and Black Rain wasn't the worst idea. He clearly knew action films inside and out. Plus, if the movie needed a big plot twist, de Bont had also done solid work on Basic Instinct. Without much enthusiasm, de Bont agreed to direct Speed. According to him, his first thought after reading the script was how to stay awake while shooting it. He also claimed that he immediately brought up Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock as casting choices, but the studio ignored him. Taking Graham Yost's advice, the studio first reached out to Jeff Bridges and Ellen DeGeneres, who the script was originally written for. DeGeneres declined, saying she was too busy working on her own TV series. However, years later, after she became a household name, she claimed she was never officially offered the role, because if she had been, she would have accepted it. She also dismissed all the talk about her refusal as speculation. Jeff Bridges, on the other hand, made his refusal very clear. He repeatedly said that a movie about some madman blowing up buses seemed too dumb to him. Now, if it had been some Irish thug trying to blow him up, that would have been a different story. So instead of signing on for Speed, he took a role in Blown Away, a 1994 movie where Tommy Lee Jones tries, and fails, to blow him up. Unfortunately for Bridges, his expert explosion dodging didn't impress audiences and the film flopped. After Ellen and Jeff turned the movie down, the studio started making its way through the list of Hollywood Baldwins. There were plenty of them, but none accepted the role. The only one who never even got an offer was Daniel Baldwin. Stephen and William Baldwin both declined Speed because they thought it felt like a low-budget B-movie. Ironically, just a couple of years after Speed became a massive hit, both of their careers stalled, and they ended up starring in the very kind of B-movies they had tried so hard to avoid. Fox's attempts to land a major star for Speed were met with rejection after rejection. Among those who turned it down were Tom Cruise and Bruce Willis. Cruise felt the project was too small for him, while Willis wanted to be taken more seriously as an actor and thought a silly film like this wasn't a good fit. After striking out with traditional action stars, the studio decided to take a different approach. They sent offers to Tom Hanks and Johnny Depp. Both later claimed they turned down the role because they would have looked ridiculous on screen. However, they only gave those explanations after Speed became a box office hit. The real reason? It could have been the script, or maybe they were just afraid of another flop, especially in Depp's case, as he had a string of them throughout the 90s. Wesley Snipes passed on Speed because he thought the budget, $25 million, was too low. At that point in his career, he wasn't willing to star in anything that cheap. He never commented on the script, nor did Nicolas Cage, who was also offered the lead role. If Cage had taken it, his action career might have kicked off earlier, and movies like The Rock and Con Air could have ended up with someone else in the lead. Kim Basinger also thought the film was beneath her, and Halle Berry outright called the script extremely stupid. According to Berry, the version she read was completely different from what ended up on screen. When she saw how successful Speed became, she regretted turning it down, so much so that she once joked about wanting to strangle someone over it. There were even rumors that Meryl Streep was offered the female lead. At the time, she was already a two-time Oscar winner with several nominations under her belt. Whether the offer was serious or just Hollywood gossip remains unclear. Eventually, the studio settled on Keanu Reeves, but he wasn't exactly eager to sign on. Instead of outright refusing, he pushed for a rewrite, wanting several aspects of the script changed. The revisions were handled by Joss Whedon, who would later go on to direct The Avengers. Whedon reportedly rewrote almost all the dialogue and smoothed out the script's rough edges, though he received no official credit for it. After the rewrites, Reeves agreed to do Speed, but with one condition: a $1.2 million paycheck, the biggest of his career at the time. Sandra Bullock's situation was different. The studio didn't want her for the role, but after every actress they approached turned it down, director Jean de Bont pushed for her again. This time, they finally agreed. Bullock took advantage of the situation and negotiated a deal where, on top of her $200,000 salary, she would receive a hefty bonus if the movie performed well. That gamble paid off. She ended up walking away with $600,000. Many argue that with different lead actors, Speed wouldn't have been as successful. That's probably true. But even more importantly, Speed itself could have been a completely different movie. Before Keanu signed on, the script had the bus circling a parking lot for most of the film, never dropping below 20 miles per hour. That's why it was originally titled Minimum Speed. The 50 miles per hour rule was added only after Reeves was cast. Director Jean de Bont later explained that he wanted Keanu in the lead role because he was attractive to women, but didn't come across as a threat to men. He was also skinny, making it easy for the average American to believe that they could pull off the same stunts. Filming Speed started with an unexpected problem. De Bont insisted that Keanu cut his hair short. When 20th Century Fox saw the new look, they freaked out. They were worried audiences wouldn't recognize him. The studio almost delayed production, but de Bont convinced them that, if anything, it would help separate Reeves from his comedic past in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Then, as filming neared its end, the production ran out of money. With no budget left for the final quarter of the movie, Fox held test screenings using animated storyboards for the subway sequence. The audience laughed at the crude animations, but they loved the movie. That reaction convinced the studio to greenlight more funding, increasing the film's budget to $30 million and allowing de Bont to finish the subway scenes properly. According to one of the producers, they knew they had a massive hit on their hands the moment they saw the audience's reaction during the first test screening of the completed film. Initially, Speed was scheduled for release in August 1994. Fox didn't have high hopes for it and planned to bury it behind their main summer blockbuster, True Lies, which was set to drop in July. But after the test screening's overwhelmingly positive response, they moved up the release to June, hoping it would gain momentum as a warm-up act for True Lies. Speed hit theaters in the U.S. on June 7, 1994. It opened at number 1, but only held the top spot for a week before being dethroned by Wolf. The following week, The Lion King took over, followed by Forrest Gump, and then True Lies. Even with all that competition, Speed still pulled in massive numbers. In fact, it grossed only $30 million less worldwide than True Lies, despite having a budget nearly a quarter of the size. While True Lies cost $115 million to make, Speed only needed $30 million, making it far more profitable in the eyes of the studio. The film also won 2 Academy Awards, Best Sound and Best Sound Editing. In the U.S., Speed made $121 million. Globally, it brought in another $229 million for a total of $350 million. A year later, Die Hard with a Vengeance barely edged past that total by only $11 million, despite having a much larger budget. Even The Rock, which came out later, fell short of Speed's worldwide box office by $15 million. Without exaggeration, Speed was a phenomenon. It catapulted both Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock to stardom, especially in Bullock's case. Reeves, however, never chased massive paychecks the way other stars did, so he never commanded the kinds of salaries Bullock would later earn. But he did eventually score one of the biggest paydays in Hollywood history when he negotiated for back-end profits on another blockbuster. Naturally, after Speed's success, the studio wanted more. They threw money at everyone involved in the first film, hoping to lock them in for a sequel. Keanu Reeves was offered the most, but he wasn't interested. So, Fox focused on Sandra Bullock instead. And we all know how that turned out. Speed 2 Cruise Control, which cost a staggering $160 million, became one of the biggest flops of the 1990s. We've talked about that disaster before. Maybe because of its awful sequel, Speed doesn't get as much recognition today as some other 90s action films, even ones that performed worse at the box office. Back in 1994, Hollywood thought the Die Hard era was over. A new kind of action hero had arrived, but as it turned out, that hero lasted only about an hour. Thanks for watching and stay tuned.